Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody is happy and healthy and you've been well. So the patent office in the US has published a new Garmin patent, which I thought would be of interest to all of us, and so that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Now, as is often the case with patents, the title doesn't let you know quite exactly what it is that it's about, and so it might seem to be slightly misleading, but nonetheless, one of the key things that I've picked up from this patent is that Garmin is actually at least thinking about blood glucose measurements. So to start from the beginning, the title of this patent, in case any of you are interested in this, is Pressure Compensation for Wrist-Based Spectrometry, which is not inaccurate because they do talk quite extensively about how to adjust the algorithms for the impact of different pressures. But that's not what I sort of found most interesting about this patent. What I found interesting is that they talk quite extensively about glycated hemoglobin, HbA1c or A1c for short, which is something that I'm sure most of you have seen somewhere on your lab work, blood lab work, because it's obviously a standard measure that's reported whenever we sort of do lab work on the blood. And so what I want to do in this video is to talk briefly about what HbA1c is and what it does. And then I want to talk a little bit about whether I think having HbA1c measurement on your watch would be useful and potential pitfalls with that. So with that, let's dive right in. So HbA1c, glycated hemoglobin, as I'm sure we all appreciate, hemoglobin is sort of the iron-rich protein in red blood cells. It carries oxygen. It also carries carbon dioxide, which we breathe out. Red blood cells live for about 4 months or thereabout. And so HbA1c measurement is sort of the percentage of hemoglobin proteins in red blood cells that have been glycated or have sort of sugar attached to them. It's sort of a non-enzymatic reaction that happens in the blood. And once sugar is attached to a hemoglobin protein, it stays there for the rest of the life of the red blood cell. And so from that point of view, HbA1c is considered a good measure of sort of average of 2-3 month blood sugar levels. And that's why it's frequently shown on lab reports. Now, it's different sort of from the measurement that we get on finger pricks, which is capillary blood, right? And that is sort of more of an indication of blood sugar level in a much shorter time interval of sort of 1 to 3 hours, which is sort of the time that it takes for glucose to clear from the blood, with, help of insulin and all of those wonderful things that I think we're all well aware of. And so what makes it possible to measure HbA1c and obviously differentiate glycated hemoglobin from non-glycated hemoglobin is that there are slightly different molecular structures, and therefore they have slightly different light signatures in the infrared spectrum, which is what's sort of relevant here. And so having said that, I guess the question becomes, would having HbA1c measurements shown on our sports watches or not, would be useful? And my personal opinion is it would and it wouldn't, because quite frankly, it doesn't tell the whole story. Not to be too critical of it, but there is a little bit of an element here of sort of the drunk having lost his keys, looking for his keys in the middle of the night under the street lamp, because that's where the light is, not because that's where he lost his keys. I think we've all heard that story. And what I mean by that is that, unfortunately, it is perfectly possible to have perfectly normal blood glucose levels because of elevated insulin. And so insulin is working over time to keep your blood sugar level low, to in effect help the blood sugar to get into the cells so it doesn't stay in the bloodstream. But unfortunately, to do that, insulin is elevated, and as we know, elevated insulin is obviously a result of insulin resistance, which we know is not a good thing because ultimately type 2 diabetes is insulin resistance, which forces the body to produce more and more insulin, which generates all kinds of negative downstream effects in terms of what happens in our body. And so if all we look at is HbA1c, but don't have insulin values to go with it, we could easily be misled. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that Garmin is trying to do something bad or something evil. They're not. They're obviously trying potentially to help us understand one of the things that we would otherwise have to go to a lab and do blood work for. But I just want us to be aware of the fact that this is not the whole picture. And so for that reason, what do I ultimately think about it? I obviously think it's good if the Garmins, the Apples, the Polars, and everybody else of this world who makes smart devices, wearables, and whatnot, add more capabilities to them. More information is a good thing. Expanding our technical capabilities in terms of what we can measure with spectrometry and whatnot, I think is a good thing. It just requires the user, of course, to be aware of the fact that they're seeing a partial picture and not the full picture, and that they still need to be concerned with their insulin levels, even though their HbA1c levels may be normal, right? Now, having said all of this, we obviously don't know if Garmin is actually actively working on productizing this and bringing it to their watches. It will be very interesting to see. I actually hope they do, because I do think there is some value to it, and I have no idea if in parallel with this they're also working on insulin measurement. I hope they are. That would be terrific. Having both of those, I think, would be great. And so, hope you found it interesting. Obviously, we'll continue to follow this and see what happens and bring you the news. And in the meantime, take good care of yourselves and be well. Take care. Bye-bye.